It's so effortless, you rarely ever think about it. But for others, such a struggle. They will agonize over it every single moment. Because failing to do this one small thing, even within the next few minutes, will result in death. Breathing is the most crucial action a human being can take on a moment-by-moment basis. This is the compelling reason that Greg Carter and other medical professionals across the state of Washington have devoted their lives to the study of respiration and ways to advance the methods of care available to those who fight to breathe. Greg is the president of the RCSW, and he's next on Spotlight on the Sound.
Welcome to Spotlight on the Sound, a weekend magazine focusing on Puget Sound luminaries whose passion for touching lives is making a difference in our community. And now your host, David Summers.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight on the Sound, Salem Radio Seattle's weekend showcase of the hardest working hearts in our community. It's our hope that you come away from today's show not only with a greater familiarity with a truly great program, but with the inspiration to become involved and to help make the Puget Sound a better and brighter place to live. With me today are Greg Carter, president of the RCSW, and some of the members of the RCSW. Welcome to you all.
Thank you for having us.
And if you could, please introduce yourselves.
My name is Carl Hinkson.
My name is Chris Teegardin.
My name is Linda Wilson.
And I'm Greg Carter.
Very good. Well, what is the RCSW? What does that stand for?
Well, the RCSW stands for, it's a Respiratory Care Society of Washington. We are a group of respiratory care therapists, also known as respiratory care practitioners. And we're affiliated with our parent organization, which is the AARC. And that stands for American Association for Respiratory Care. So basically a profession of respiratory therapists.
So a little science here. How does respiration work?
Fairly simple. To make it as easy as possible, air goes in and air comes back out. We bring in air to oxygenate our tissues in our body, and we blow off CO2, which is a byproduct of what's being made due to energy in our body.
I'm sure most people, they just do it without even thinking about it, but we have you folks on because sometimes it's something people have to think about, especially if they're suffering from some kind of disease. And what kind of diseases are most common in Washington State, respiratory-wise?
Chris, you want to take that one?
I can field that. Per an American Lung Association report from 2010, in Washington State, asthma is the most prevalent diagnosis affecting about 610,000 individuals. A little over 300 individuals have a diagnosis of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Now, you may know this as chronic bronchitis or emphysema. Okay. It's also, for short, it's called COPD.
Oh, okay, yes.
So we'll refer to it as COPD from this point forward. Now, COPD causes progressive damage to the lungs, so its deficits that develop from it aren't evident for years. Over 16 million Americans have been diagnosed with COPD, and there's estimated another 16 million haven't, they just don't know it yet. Given these national estimates, there are probably 600,000 people in this state. And I'd like to add COPD is the fourth leading cause of death in the United States. The other big one is obstructive sleep apnea. This is also called OSA. About 25 million adults in the United States have it. I don't have an estimate for the state of Washington, but looking at comparable percentages, we're probably looking at 450 to 500,000 people.
Now, are those diagnosed, or is that what they estimate, even those folks who haven't been diagnosed?
And for OSA, that would be an estimation. For, of course, asthma in our state, that's a diagnosis, and of course, COPD, the 600,000 is an estimation in the state.
Well, what is the impact that respiratory conditions can have on an individual's productivity? I mean, let's translate this into economic terms if we could.
Oh, certainly. Physical exertion and exercise are diminished or limited. You're more susceptible to respiratory infections like colds and pneumonias. The effects of colds, flus, and pneumonia are much greater and linger longer. When you're sick, asthma and COPD reactions, what we call exacerbations, occur more frequently and oftentimes are more severe. There's an increase in healthcare costs, quite certainly with this.
Yes.
There's an increase in missed work days.
Yeah.
Individuals in advanced stages of COPD may require supplemental oxygen, and of course, their typical daily activity is profoundly limited. Individuals with moderate to severe levels of obstructive sleep apnea are known to have 4.5 times more often to have coronary heart disease, myocardial infarction, and angina. In addition, these moderate or severe untreated sleep apnea individuals have been estimated to have 4 to 10 times more car accidents.
Wow, that's not even something that I
population.
would have even thought about. But we're talking about fatigue, causing fatigue.
Absolutely,
that causes
they never
people
get
to
enough
fall
sleep.
asleep.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, I know in the past few months, Washington State and other states, the western states, have been hit hard by the fires and the forest fires. And what kind of impact has this had on breathing, respiration, the ash, everything else, all the other chemicals and whatnot released by burning trees in the area? And how can people protect themselves from inhaling that kind of stuff?
Well, I guess I can keep going with that. We spoke to some of our colleagues in eastern Washington, and they believe they're seeing an increase in respiratory-related cases. We really don't have any hard data just yet to confirm this. It's just too early for that information to be collected and looked at. The smokes from these fires contain a lot of suspended irritants and toxins. This is carbon monoxide, wood ash, PCPs, just to name a few. In addition, free radicals from wood smoke are chemically active 40 times longer than those from cigarette smoke. Even the healthiest person exposed to this type of smoke for a period of time will develop ill effects from it, and individuals with asthma and COPD are at a much higher risk of an exacerbation event that can potentially be life-threatening.
Now, would this be the case even with just like a beach fire or your campfire, whatever the smoke you're breathing? Is it likely to also cause problems of this magnitude?
For a healthy individual, not a prolonged problem, but you don't want to obviously put your head in the smoke. Now, certainly asthma and COPD patients, they need to be as far away
Stay
from
away
this
from
as
the
possible.
campfires.
Exactly.
Okay. But aside from the danger of forest fires, are there any other conditions unique to the state of Washington? I mean, I'm a little curious to find out why there are so many asthma cases in Washington. Does anyone know why that may be the case?
Well, obviously for individuals with asthma and COPD, the airway passages of the lungs are very reactive to airway irritants, what we call triggers.
Uh-huh.
The state of Washington has a lot of triggers. I don't think the environment
Evergreen
is
trees,
any worse or better than any place else. Outdoor triggers, air pollution and smog. We got
okay.
that.
Any natural triggers, do you suppose?
Well, certainly, trees and grasses, pollens and molds. Those are common triggers. We have rainforest in this state, dry, humid air, not so much here.
Right.
Hot, humid air. Cold, dry air is another trigger. Strong winds, profound changes in weather, sudden changes in weather can affect people. And, these things apply to the state of Washington, but we're certainly not unique across the country.
This is true. Well, help us to understand a little more about the organization and how the organization came about. Give us what were the factors that brought about the RCSW?
Carl, you'd like to answer that?
Sure. Well, respiratory therapy began as a field back in the late 40s in Chicago by a group of physicians, nurses, nuns, and some orderlies who recognized a need for health caregivers with a specialized need in oxygen devices, and they sort of formed the seed of the respiratory care profession. This was popularized and kind of grew into Washington State, and in the early 70s, the Respiratory Care Society, which back then was called the Washington State of Respiratory Therapy, sort of formed with the primary goal of setting up educational opportunities for the general public, but mostly for the practitioners of the state, and to organize educational programs because there were no formal educational programs for respiratory therapy at the time. So since then, the organization has been focused a lot on providing education, making education opportunities available for respiratory therapists. We're licensed in the state and we require continuing education credits. Also, we have a big interest in the training programs. We want to make sure that there are enough qualified individuals to care for the respiratory care patients
Right.
in Washington State.
Yeah,
So-
no one else would be even looking after. I mean, I wouldn't imagine you probably have government organizations saying, well, let's make sure we have enough respiratory care therapists.
No, it is really is an interest of our own. We're sort of like our own special interest group, making sure that there are enough qualified individuals to look after these patients. They do require some specialized knowledge, and we do have specialized training and competency testing to care for these patients.
Now, I happened to run across your booth at the Puyallup Fair, but what other ways are you getting the word out about your organization?
We're here today for one, which is great. But we have a website. It's www.rcsw.org. Of course, we also do the social media. We have a Facebook page. But we really do try to get out. We have various chapters. We have five chapters in the state. So we're stationed. We have a chapter in Eastern Washington. We have a chapter in the Central Washington area, Seattle, Pierce County. And so each of those chapters are responsible to put on some type of seminar or go to a health fair.
Okay.
So, we try to get out to the public, like you said, the Puyallup Fair, where we participated for World Spirometry Day, and we also did the Drive for COPD. We have some other local programs. Some of the instructors and some of the other therapists of our association goes out and speaks to local high schools about tobacco cessation programs. But since we are such a small organization, it's one of our biggest challenges is to get the word out.
Right. Well, what are some of the ways that you are cultivating an interest in respiratory care? What would draw someone, especially young people, as maybe they're considering going into the medical field, or even if maybe they just happen to have a relative who has some kind of a condition and they're thinking, well, maybe that's the direction I want to go. What draws someone to go into the respiratory field?
I'm also an instructor, so I can tell you most of the students in our program usually have some relation, a parent, a loved one, or themselves usually have a respiratory care condition. I kind of say we're the forgotten field when it comes to the allied health field. Most people think there's just doctors and nurses working in allied health or in the health field, and there are other people. There's respiratory therapists. And part of my job is to go out to local high schools, that offer the career trainings, and speak to what respiratory therapy is and what we do. And I think at some of these health fairs, and I think at the Puyallup Fair, we had handouts. What is a respiratory therapist, to describe what we do. Because most people have no idea who we are or that we even exist.
That's true, and I certainly didn't know before I saw your organization at the fair. And it seems to me that respiratory care is kind of an abstract concept to a lot of people. But do you have any specific stories about how your role in respiratory care, or even in training someone in this field, has had an impact on people?
I can think of one story. I don't want to violate HIPAA rules, but
right.
There was a patient at where I work. I'm trying to not say where I work. That he was very chronically ill, and he was what we call ventilator dependent, and he would come in very infrequently, depending upon the weather or his health. He would come in several times a year for a long-term admission. And then the respiratory therapist at where I work did a lot of training of him and his wife so that he could go home on the ventilator. They lived in a rural area of Washington State. We got to be very familiar with him and his wife, first name basis. Probably is the one of the few patients whose funerals I actually attended, but he did die eventually. And it is very nice for us because we still see his wife. She comes into our report room on a first name basis, and we kind of catch up. So
you helped to give this man some independence at a time.
Yeah, for what he could, we gave him some independence, and because it was a big goal for him to live at home with his wife, even though he was ventilator dependent, had a lot of other chronic illnesses.